Hey, what's up? My name's Ryan. I'm a big lover of tech and DIY, and today I'd like to show you how I made a custom power button for my PC. This project was cheap, simple, and a lot of fun, so let's get into it. Now, if you're in the market for a desktop power button, whether it be for convenience's sake or because your existing button is no longer working, there are some options out there that are inexpensive and should suit the needs of most. Unfortunately, I don't love the look of any of these options, but you can't argue the value they provide. Initially, I was looking at flexing some of my electrical and newly acquired soldering skills on this project, but I couldn't pass up an $8 button that included the wiring harness and PCIe bracket that I would be needing. Since I would only be using the internals, my sole requirement was that the button housing could disassemble easily. The push button I ordered is made by Goldenfield, though there are a few others out there that share the same appearance with different branding. When it came down to choosing a switch, I wanted something that matched the aesthetic we've attempted to cultivate in our room. Finding a 5-volt DC momentary switch that had the look and was also inexpensive was not easy. I settled on an ornamental black cast iron doorbell for $14. Now, doorbells are AC, and I wouldn't suggest anyone use an AC switch in a DC circuit. It worked in this application, but I'd advise against doing so. I'll leave a link to some DC switches in the description below, along with the parts that I used. Even if you hate the button housing like I did, you can still use the switch that is included with the button assembly. The big takeaway here is to make sure you use a DC switch in a DC circuit. When it came to disassembling the stock button housing, it was a pretty straightforward process. On the bottom of the assembly, I found 4 Phillips screws beneath rubber feet. I then used a pry tool to lift the bottom plate off, which exposed 1 screw for the reset switch and 2 for the main power button assembly. With these screws removed and a little bit of hot glue pulled away, I was able to release the power button from the plastic clips it sat within. The PCIe bracket this unit came with is unfinished aluminum, so I opted to spray paint mine black. I also chose to wrap the wiring harness in black electrical tape. This step was completely unnecessary since I was using a black jumper my motherboard came with to connect the wiring harness, but I could see the colored wires in the basement of my case and it bothered me. Call me crazy. While connecting the pins provided with the wiring harness, you will need to consult your user's manual for your specific motherboard. Before I started cutting into my desk, I wanted to test out the doorbell and make sure everything would work properly. I then gathered measurements from my desk to ensure I had proper clearance for the switch and the wiring harness. Once I felt comfortable with my dimensions, I marked out a spot on my desk and began drilling pilot holes around the outside. I then used a paddle bit to remove a majority of the wood, then finally cleaned up the cut with a jigsaw. Next, I cut a 1/2-inch hole in the back of my desk using a hole saw. I used a fish tape to run the harness through the channel I created inside the desk, and then stripped the power button wires. The doorbell mounting holes were almost an exact fit for the LEDs included with this harness, so I chose to hot glue the LEDs in place and then drill 2 new mounting holes towards the outside of the doorbell plate. I then attached the power button leads to the doorbell button and secured them with some more hot glue. It was finally time to mount the doorbell in place, and with that, the installation process was complete. I spent $22 and about an hour's worth of work on this project, and there are some things I might go back and change in retrospect, in particular finding a way to diffuse the LEDs, but I'm still super happy with how things turned out. With the right parts and a little bit of patience, I think this is a project just about anyone could tackle. That's going to take care of things for today. Thank you so much for sticking around. Please consider subscribing. If you've got any questions or if you've got an idea for a custom button of your own, leave it in the comments below. Again, please consider subscribing. Thank you and have a good one.